Hello everybody, I felt compelled to make this video. It's about pyramids, but I think for a lot of people, if people like locally to me, some of my friends and family watch this video, we're not actually going to be talking about these pyramids. We're going to be talking about a pyramid that's only about 20-30 miles away from me, where people have no idea it's a pyramid. We're going to be talking about this pyramid, but as I've just said, it's not known as a pyramid. Not really. I mean, you can find information on the internet, but actually people around here will still not believe or know it's a pyramid. And what we're talking about here is Silbury Hill. Silbury Hill. It's right next to Avebury, and it's not that far from Stonehenge. So what I'm going to do is just show you in a moment is some information regarding what it's kind of listed as on the internet. You know, like what it's been there for a long time information. Hang on a second. We're going into the Wiltshire countryside on the way to Bristol, Caen, along this road called the A4, and right next to the road is this mound. Now I've sat on that on Solstice Day, and then about 10 years, a few years more than that, they stopped anybody going onto this and sitting on here. I suppose because in reality a part of it had actually collapsed inside, or that's what they said, and that they were going to excavate it. But loads of people would sit on there on Solstice Day looking at Avebury, which is across here. I'll just show you what Avebury is. This is Avebury. Avebury is a stone circle. Here there are he and she stones, and many people come here. You get a nice awe from being there, and it's a place I really like to go to. Anyway, if you're sitting on the top of Silbury Hill, you can see Avebury. Here is Silbury Hill, and if you were sitting on top of there, you'd see Avebury over here, wherever it is. It's about a mile or two away, maybe 3 miles from here. And as you can see, this place gathers such amazing, just so many amazing things, like many corn circles turn up there, all around Avebury and Silbury Hill. This is how close they are. See, just a few miles apart from each other. And then, just a few miles to the right of it, I suppose it depends which way you're standing, but if you're facing Avebury and Silbury Hill to your right, would be this place a few miles up the road called the Long Barrows, which, you know, we're told are burial chambers. But I mean, just look at this. This is supposed to be burial chambers. And it is a structure like that, and you can go in it, and there are some stones there. So that's the Long Barrows, which is just a few miles up the road. So that's something else. And I'll tell you something else which is very close by to all these places, maybe miles away, are these. As you go further away from London, down to sort of like Wiltshire, onto Dorset, onto Devon, onto Cornwall, you come across this area where all these horses are chalked into the hills, and they've been there for a long time. I mean, the oldest one I think is near Oxford. Yeah, so these are real. These are not hoaxes, or these are really in the hillside. And this horse actually isn't near Avebury. It's in Oxfordshire, another county not that far from me. I have Wiltshire to one side, I have Oxfordshire the other side. And this is the Uffington White Horse, which is the oldest one in the United Kingdom. And it's supposed to be, however many thousands of years old. So that's on Wikipedia. these chalk white horses all sort of around this area. So I'm going to show you one more in Marlborough, which is about 5-10 miles away from Avebury. So you've got this horse. Okay, there are loads of horses around, but this one's 5-10 miles away from Avebury and Silbury Hill. Anyway, back to Silbury Hill. Do you see the information that you're being given on the internet? Although you can find other information, this information all still sits there. This is what you'll find. You know, we're just told it's a sort of prehistoric mound. That was it, you know, not anything else, just a mound of earth. So they didn't even know what it was. That's what we were told here, more as the local people. But this is the kind of thing you can find on the internet as about Silbury Hill on the historic side of things. After all, this is what it looks like. It's not a burial chamber, like they say well, that's what they were saying it was, like they're saying Stonehenge was, and like they say the pyramids are. But inside, this is what it looks like. Over time, although it's still flat, it has collapsed a bit inside, which is why people can't go and sit up there, and they've shored it up. But looking in there, they can find chambers, and so they know what structure it is inside. I know this is a picture, but looking more like that. Like this. And this. I did say that I used to go and sit on top of it. I'm not saying I went millions of times, but I have sat a few times on top of that mound there. We'll call it a mound at the moment. You can see that the reason they stopped people going up there was they had to do work on it because the top of it had started to collapse in. But then that's how they knew what structure was inside, because, as I've said, it was just a mound. Just a mound of earth. They didn't even know what it was. Anyway, into doing research for Flat Earth, and I did know a while ago this information, but I couldn't believe it. Like, was it a pyramid after all? Like, oh, is that what they're saying? Oh, I really always wanted to know what it was, because it couldn't just be a mound like that, or just one mound like that. You know, I don't know. You can see it sort of as a strange looking thing on the side of the road. If you think it's a mound, yeah, if you think that way, to go to the world pyramids. Okay, very interesting they are. You scroll down and see Silbury Hill in world pyramids. It's a pyramid. It's the most northern, they say, pyramid. It's a pyramid. I have a pyramid. It's a white pyramid maybe, but I have a pyramid 20-30 miles away from me, and I've been there a few good times. I'm really chuffed. But nobody around here really knows about that. No one really knows it's a pyramid of the world. And then what you find is there's all these circles also around Silbury Hill, the pyramid. I'll show you some more. So just to remind you, just up the road is Avebury, which is a circle. There are more stones which lead down in a path. I'm not really sure which way, I think, I can't work out which way it is from here, sorry. But there is. There on another road, the entrance coming up to this. And you can see some of the stones here. And there is a moat which runs all the way around it as well. Just to explain that Avebury itself, the stones are a bit more intricate than just looking like that. They're like this. You know, there's quite a lot of stones. A lot, not all, but sometimes if the bigger corn circles are not round, there'll be lots of little round ones around it. But round corn circles. Avebury. And then there are these. They'll tell you that they're burial mounds, but they don't really look like burial mounds, do they? They look like something else. And look at the shape they've put round it. What is this? From another angle, you can see animals this time. That's more what Avebury would have looked like. Amazing if they are man-made, because some of them are just absolutely amazing. To think that somebody can easily do that unless it's done by some military, you know, using a device to do that. I've always felt that. I always felt that you know, it's being done on purpose, but it's other means of making this. The thing I thought of was the military. There's Avebury. There's Pyramid, Silbury Hill. This is a place called Windmill Hill, which isn't that far away either from Silbury Hill. These tree roots of some of these trees in Avebury. Wow, I just came across this picture. This says that it's a newly discovered Neolithic complex near Chichester, West Sussex, which is probably, I don't know, 40-50 miles from Avebury. Anyway, it's just interesting. So, Silbury Hill is a pyramid of the world. So amazed. That's the long barrows. Anyway, I hope that people have found this interesting, that maybe some people in my area will watch this and realise what Silbury Hill is, or other people around the world will see strange Silbury Hill pyramid. Thank you for watching.
Intel, and that's as far as I can understand it, I'm afraid. He's the author of the book Silbury Dawning, which talks about Silbury Hill. And what he's going to be talking about today about Silbury Hill is it one of the very first pyramids? So I think we're going to have a very exciting hour. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to John Cowie.
Thank you, Sheila. Before I get into the Silbury Hill White Pyramid, the intriguing Silbury Hill White Pyramid question, I think it's important to understand what was so significant about pyramids that we find them on every continent on Earth, built on every continent on Earth in our prehistory. To help me explain the amazing qualities, the amazing properties of the pyramid, which seem to have been clearly understood by our ancient ancestors, I'd like to use a simple experiment here, which is a suspended pyramid. So I'd like to ask my volunteer if he basically rubs his hands together and points his fingers at the base of the pyramid. Now, if you put them both together, sorry, and then just hold them near the base of the pyramid. It's fine if you just hold them there. Now, I appreciate this experiment, this simple experiment, doesn't meet with the rigors of scientific experimentation, but hopefully, if Nigel says it long enough, this is not going as it was rehearsed. No, not true. Just hold on. That's okay. If you just hold it there for a moment, that's fine. And just leave it there. won't take too much time on this, but it was quite handy just for allowing a few people to come in. You can just about begin to see it rotate. If you just watch it carefully, you begin to see it rotate. And just leave it for a moment there. Well done, Nigel, that's good. You can see it just slightly rotating. So, what's causing the pyramid to rotate? Well, I have to enter into the world of quantum physics, which is quite a good subject for a Sunday morning. My thanks basically to Professor Brian Cox for greatly increasing the public awareness of this fundamental science. So let's have a... I think we're okay, Nigel. I think we'll give you a chance to have a seat. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Brilliant. Well done. So, Nigel rubbed his hands together, pointed at the pyramid. So what we can see from our early days, science days at school, we have a hydrogen atom and an oxygen atom. If we combine two hydrogen atoms, one there, you have the chemical compound H2O, which we all know is water. So what Nigel was doing was reversing the process. He was rubbing his hands together and was bringing the water, if you like, back, because he's made of 70% water, as we all are, bringing the water back to atoms. So we have a hydrogen atom and an oxygen atom. Now, the hydrogen atom has one proton, which is positive charge, and one electron, which is negative charge. The oxygen atom has 8. Imagine 8 of these white crosses in here, and 8 electrons in the outside shells. Now, the important thing about atoms is they have no charge. The energy is neutral. All atoms, no charge. Now, the clever thing is, by rubbing his hands together, created some kinetic energy, this movement, which generated heat, which is enough energy to disturb the electron situation here in the hydrogen atom. You probably heard the story about the hydrogen atom who went into a bar, and the barman said, "You're not looking very well today, you look a bit fed up." And the hydrogen atom explained, "I've lost my electron." And the barman says, "Are you sure?" And the hydrogen atom says, "Yes, I'm positive." And there he goes. So the hydrogen atom now has lost his electron, and the electron is negatively charged, so he now becomes a positively charged ion. Now, of the last, in crop circles areas, we're starting to begin to hear the word ion being mentioned. So this is a hydrogen ion, and because it's lost its electron, it's a positive charged particle, and it's known as a cation, just to give you the full story. Now, the oxygen atom has got lots of electrons in the outer circle, so it's you need quite a lot of energy to move the electrons in the outer circle, so it's easier for the oxygen atom to collect a couple of electrons. So that now becomes a negatively charged ion, and that's known as an anion. Start singing and you'll die, no. Anyway. So we have very simple, fundamental principles of quantum physics. Atoms have no charge, but by disturbing the atom, the electrons in the atom, we can have a positive ion and a negative ion. Okay? Now, to give you the full story, the full picture, in Nigel's body, all our bodies, we have 70% hydrogen, oxygen, and so on, calcium, carbon, 29%, 1%, these other areas. Now, if you look down left-hand side, they're all cations. They're all positively charged. And if you look down the right-hand side, they're all anions. They're all negatively charged. Now, the important picture up here is this. The sun is a positively charged body, and the earth is negative charge. So when Nigel's rubbing his hands, these guys are all heading up through the pyramid, heading towards the sun. And these guys here are heading towards the floor because they're attracted to the earth. But in actual fact, because I'm wondering about here, there's a lot of still a lot of positive ions coming in through the top. So we've got this ionic flow of current. So you can see there's lots of energies. There's heat we saw, which is motion, can be wind or whatever, can be light, photons from light. It can be mechanical, it can be chemical. There's all sorts of types of energy that can create radiation, which is enough to disturb the electrons in all atoms. So we're sitting here, and you're swapping your ions with your neighbor sitting next to you. So you're swapping ions. In fact, you're swapping ions with everyone and everything. As I speak, some of your anions are heading up through the ionosphere towards the sun. So without realizing it, you're space travelers. It'd be intriguing to note if there's any information on our anions, if there's some GCHQ type of organization on some distant planet intercepting and interrogating our information. Anyway, let's get back down to Earth. We can see we have packets of atoms, ions, electrons. We have packets of atoms, ions, electrons in this universal soup. The Buddha, a few thousand years ago, he described it really quite cleverly as we're drops of water joined together in an ocean. And it's interesting, intriguing, where his idea of non-self and transience, nothing is everlasting, where these ideas came from. Anyhow, food, drink, rest, and energy from the sun is important aspects in recharging our batteries. Now, we've heard, because I've been listening to all the presentations, we've heard quite a bit about energy, electrostatic energy, and so on. Especially we talk about UFOs and crop circles and things like that. And I just think it's worth just explaining a little bit about a capacitor. Here they are in an electric circuit. And about the contrast batteries, as I mentioned, they store energy chemically. So these manufacturers of these alkaline batteries spend a lot of time, a lot of effort producing new materials, such as graphene and all sorts of different things, to increase the life of a battery. So you get batteries, all shapes and sizes. We've seen 20 pence size type batteries in these. And they're every year almost extending the life of a battery, which is great, especially if for those who have pacemakers, we're finding batteries now can last up to 12 years. So that battery technology is important, but again, this is combining chemicals to produce the energy. Capacitor, on the other hand, uses this principle we've just seen, where if you connect a battery to the circuit, all the anions will move towards the plus side, and all the electrons move towards the negative side. Sorry, the cations, will move towards the negative side. And you get in this movement, depletion, and a dielectric, depending on the material, this stores energy electrostatically. Now, I kind of jump slightly because I've got to say that I don't want to get too involved in applications for capacitors. No, they're used to tune radio circuits, they're used for tone control and audio systems and so on. But I thought it's worth looking at this use in a camera flash because, again, it explains what I've just been talking about, how you switch on, here's your battery, your normal chemical battery, and that creates energy which creates a situation where your atoms become ions. So they deplete, and all your negative ions head towards the positive charge, and all the positive ions head towards the negative charge. I forgot to mention that when we talked about the sun and the earth, obviously the negative will head towards the positive side, and the positive to the negative side. So you build up this charged capacitor. A sad trick used to be played on electronics students or electronics apprentices, that they used to charge up the capacitor and leave it on the desk. And somebody said, could you hand me the capacitor? And of course, they pick it up and get a shock. Quite a nasty shock. So we didn't actually kill anyone, but we were close a few times. No, it's not true. So we've charged up the the capacitor, just on this simple principle, is we're converting the atoms into positive and negative ions. Now, when you take the picture, you click on a camera, it's almost instantaneous. You move from this circuit into the flashbulb circuit, and the current flows through, and you get a flash, very quick flash. And because it's a very quick click, you're back immediately into recharging the battery. And you go through the process, charges, click, you've taken your photograph, and it'll stop doing it when you switch the camera off. Obviously, your battery is disconnected from the circuit, and it becomes stable. So I hope we're seeing a little practical application of a capacitor, because I say it's something which starts to get talked about. I hope we can see how we can produce energy in a capacitor electrostatically. Now, this is where it becomes jolly exciting, in that Pyramid does the same thing. It stores energy electrostatically in an electric field. But instead of your positive and negative on the battery, we have almost a universal energy. You have the sun with a positive charge, and your ions moving towards the sun, coming to the top plate, and the earth being the negative charge, and your cations, which are positive charge, they head towards the earth. So you get this energy build up inside a pyramid shape, or inside a pyramid. We'll see about this in a minute. Now, the other interesting thing about this slide is that all pyramids, so they're kind of designed, you've probably seen them, all the pyramids all over the world at different slopes. Some have different slopes and different materials, and depends on this, will depend. We have basically built into the pyramid a thing called a transducer. Now, transducer is a device that converts one form of energy into another. So a very simple example is the old-style Dutch windmill. It has its sails, and the wind energy blows into the sails, and through wooden gear, wheels, and shaft, it stuns two stones, and you put the grain in, and it becomes reduced to flour. So it's wind energy converted into mechanical energy. There's probably a little bit of heat energy thrown in there as well. More modern, the big wind turbines, the wind blows the turbine round, and it actually moves it's more complicated than this, but it moves a coil within a magnetic field, and it creates electricity. So electricity comes down the windmill and feeds into the national grid system. So at home, you plug your hairdryer into a socket, and you switch it on, and you get an electricity coming into your hairdryer, and the hairdryer is a transducer. It converts electricity into air, and it can become hot air. You turn up the dial to maybe, depends how quickly you want to dry your hair, which doesn't apply to me. So we can see in this modern age of electronics that a lot of this stuff has been done before. Now, so if I take this pyramid and put it firmly on the ground, we start to intercept this flow of ionic current between the earth and the sun. And here we have a flow of ions, negative ions heading up towards the sun, and the positive ions heading down from the sun towards the earth. And we can see here we're building up from 0 to 140 feet, 146 meters, sorry, at 100 volts per meter, zero voltage here, and up at the top you've got 14,600 volts. So you're generating a huge amount of electrical energy. And at the top, with the positive ions coming down, we generate magnetic exponentials, and we get a huge magnetic field also appearing at the top of this pyramid. Now, Silbury Hill has some of these components for an energy producing device. It has a sarsen stone cap, and it has a mica sheet across the bottom. But I'll talk about this a little bit later. So where are all these ions coming from, these negative ions coming from? Well, all pyramids seem to have water flowing either beneath or around them. And water, to convert water, we've seen into ions, is very simple. The water just needs to move. Water flows, or there can be temperature, it can be heated up or cooled down. There's light, all sorts of things can reduce water into positive and negative ions. So the negative ions are the ones that heading up towards the ionosphere. So they come up through the pyramid. So again, just reiterating, your negative ions, your anions head towards the sun, and your positive ions, cations, head towards Earth. So you have this universal flow of energy. Just a quick word about the sorcerer stone. So mentioned about, you can think of hundreds of loads of examples of transducer converting one form of energy into another. And we see a thing called, again, I won't dwell on it too long, this sorcerer stone, which is found which was on the top of Silbury Hill, which I won't talk about a little bit later. It has this piezoelectric effect that it converts electricity into acoustic energy or signals, frequencies. So we find lots of these, all pyramids, talk about again a little bit later, emit their own frequency. So probably at this time when Silbury Hill was in this area, I call it the Wessex complex, there's probably hundreds of Silbury Hills around. I mean, there's only a few. I mean, there's one in Silbury Hill, there's Merlin Mound, Marlborough Mound, and I remember one on the 15th tee at Marlborough Golf Club. There used to be one there. And no, it didn't help. My shot off the tee, no. Now, just a little comment about transducers, because there's an ancient word really that links in with this. It's called alchemy. It's converting one thing into another. Now, it became trivialized, if you like, in that, oh yeah, we can convert base metal into gold. And so it became trivialized, and it became, people who were involved in alchemy became ridiculed. But there are lots of serious scientists, such as Newton, for example, who has done a lot of work on this kind of this alchemy type idea, and you can find quite a lot of stuff on that side of it. But I'll just stick to this idea of converting one form of energy into another. Now, the other exciting thing when it's starting to come into the realms of extraterrestrials and so on is if we know that underground waters and caves are full of beneficial negative ions, why don't we make a bionizer, a machine required to draw off negative ions from underground water and to distribute them to the local atmosphere? This is exactly what Pyramid does. So we now have salt therapy, paleotherapy, and heliotherapy clinics. That benefits were first described in a book published by a Polish physician in 1834, who took patients with respiratory diseases and breathing difficulties down into salt mines for cures. So we can see it's a standard thing for treatments in Eastern Europe, and all modern air conditioning systems have negative ion generators. So we're beginning to see here how we're almost creating a situation where you're almost changing the atmosphere around a pyramid. So just quickly summarize this kind of technical little bit of the presentation. We can see that the pyramid intersects this flow of ionic current, and we can store electrical energy, and transducers can convert this energy into the huge forms of electrical energy into magnetic and into this kind of other forms of energy. And we can see this bionizer effect, energy of the universe, key to human development and to the rapid growth of plants and crops in the near vicinity. So we've got this combination. And finally, question I was to say, well, why wait for science? I've been doing this kind of demonstration, this kind of demonstration for some time, since about 2000. But now I've come across scientists who are actually proving what I've just been talking about with sophisticated equipment. So we're obviously seeing that pyramid shape has been proved to convert earth energy into acoustic waves in a wide range of frequencies. So there's quite what I hope I've demonstrated here, that pyramid is maybe something more than a burial chamber or a chalk mound, which we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, those in crop circle, people interested in that subject, you can sort of begin to see here how this is a Silbury Hill could have been a device which transmitted a frequency, specific frequency, and obviously it's no longer there. So maybe the messages have gone out, and they're starting to head back. So it's a bit like the idea of a modern television. A television signal from a station or a satellite doesn't come straight to your television. It goes to an antenna, the signal is recognized by the antenna, which accepts that particular frequency. So you have a sort of aerial, if you like, that will recognize the signal before it goes into the television to be converted into sound and video signals. So the question is, maybe something similar was happening. I won't get too much into it here. It's another presentation as to possible reasons how crop circles became the involvement, if you like, of places like Silbury Hill in the crop circle discussion. I'll maybe mention it briefly a little bit later on. So this is what I mentioned. I just mentioned this briefly because anybody in the audience who may be writing books or want to know a lot more about measuring these energies in the Great Pyramids and so on, I have lots of presentations from Oleg Koproshkin and his details, how to get in touch with him and all the rest of it. So I'll just very quickly. So this is one of his slides displaying how instruments, etc., methods of equipment, which you can read. And you have examples of records of seismic noise, seismic acoustic emission, and so on, coming from these various pyramids. So these are serious scientists now looking at the main pyramids and measuring these energies. These are sort of just a quick, this again, one of his slides, background of where they're placing their instruments and so on. And then this is the conclusion. The unique equipment is required, we'll read that, for the universal investigation of geophysical fields and signals. So seismic acoustic emission is accompanied by electromagnetic radiation. So there's a whole lot of energy going on within these pyramids. Now, I took this one specifically out of his presentation because it's, again, variations of seismic noise and seismic emission coming from this pyramid, which is a small pyramid, or really a pyramid mound near the Bent Pyramid. And when I first saw it, I thought, Silbury Hill. And we'll have a look at this shortly. So we're seeing these signals coming from this pyramid, the Silbury Hill, similar to Silbury Hill pyramid structure. So, in May, in May 2000, Janet Ozenbard and Bert Janssen, when the Silbury Hill shaft collapsed, they went down into the shaft, and they produced this excellent DVD which records their experiences. Now, they didn't have the sophisticated equipment that Oleg has, the Russian scientist, but this is good enough for me. And they had their mobile phone was destroyed, and also some of their camera equipment because of the energies inside Silbury Hill. Also, they found some ball light, or ball kind of lightning energy. And again, we talked about capacitors. There may be some kind of capacitor discharging effect, but we can talk about that a little bit later. And also, they discovered smooth walls. When the shaft had collapsed, they saw some smooth walls, which indicated that this had exposed a chamber inside Silbury Hill. So thanks to Janet and Bert, we have a record of this opportunistic moment where they went into Silbury Hill to discover they have, in fact, the energies that I've just been describing. Which takes me lead on to Silbury Hill itself, which is good. This is the official information you get from Google, prehistoric chalk mound, and it always gets linked in with Stonehenge and Avebury and so on. So it becomes this part of this UNESCO World Heritage Site. Here's a picture of it. You can see the kind of little water around it, quite a nice picture. Now, the English Heritage, they have a couple of different versions, which I won't bore you too much because you've seen them over the years. It's a spiral heap made from the chalk, and it's a ceremonial mound. But it's always a chalk mound. There will always be a chalk mound. But they come up with this date of 4,400 years. And where did this date come from? I've researched it, and the journey begins when you look at Stonehenge. And the date was placed on Stonehenge because it's a convenient date when the hunter-gatherer, Stone Age man, sort of started to move into this farmer-type situation. And we moved from Stone Age to Bronze Age or into the Neolithic period. And so this seemed to me to be a convenient time to place, so Stonehenge was built at this point of almost Renaissance between Stone Age and the Bronze Age. But I still couldn't find any dates, and I started to research and I discovered that your 18th, 19th, 20th century archaeologists, Egyptologists, and so on, they were all European, they were white, very wealthy, and they were Christian, which is critical. And they were all, obviously, they're also treasure hunters. So wherever they found anything, they had to be very careful, because the church was very powerful probably in terms of influencing what they found. So it had to basically follow the biblical stories and so on. So that there's a lot of, during this period, there's a lot of forbidden archaeology, and there's also a lot of forbidden technology. There's an exception, I think, is Flinders Petrie's book, Digging in Egypt, I think 1881 to 1891. He describes, and he has drawings of a diamond-tipped drill and a diamond-tipped saw. Now, where they are, I have no idea, but he does describe them in this book. So having heresy on your CV was really career-limiting, if not life-shortening. So you tended to be very careful. So this is a sort of background, because this Stonehenge, this date, 4,400 years, is not like come out just the last few years. This is like way back at least beginning of the 20th century, maybe even towards the end of the 19th century. It's a very old date that they have. Whenever people talk about Stonehenge, they always come up with, it's 4,000 year structure. This is interesting, if I can... I'll read this bit because I went to a talk a little while back, and before I mention the talk, it's just worth saying that so we kind of got stuck with this idea of 4,400 years old from Stonehenge, and then in the 1968-70 dig, which Silbury Hill, tunnel, which was involved Professor Atkinson from Cardiff University, and it was sponsored by the BBC. So they wanted to produce a number of gimmicky archaeological programs, and some of you may remember that far back when these programs were made. Now, of course, they didn't find anything. They didn't find King Sill or whatever in the center, but at the very end, they found this antler, the famous antler in the edge of the mound, and they subsequently dated it, and it became dated as 4,400 years old. And then there's this amazing leap. It was used to build Silbury Hill. So Silbury Hill kind of then sort of fell in with the Stonehenge date of 4,400 years old. Now, the question I have is, well, why haven't we found hundreds of antlers around the area? Because I imagine you need quite a few people. And I also have the view that this is a huge complex, this Wessex complex, as I call it, from Avebury down to Stonehenge and all the stuff going on between. And there was a talk given a little while back, and it was basically promoting, like Stonehenge, because they're doing lots of different things there now, and they've got a new centre and so on. So at the end of the talk, I just asked the professor, I said, well, there didn't seem to be any evidence of remains of the population required, not just to build Stonehenge, but all these other things that were obviously going on around at the time. So I felt a little bit of pressure from the audience. I thought, oh, I better not push it too far, so I kind of shut up, sat down, thought I'd better be careful. Anyway, a few weeks later, or maybe a little bit longer than that, the press article appeared in the Sunday Telegraph. Now this is it. I'll give you a little quick overview of it. Which says archaeologists have recently come up with a theory as to why so few human remains found at Stonehenge when the structure was supposedly built around 4,600 years ago. It seems that Stonehenge may have been the world's, I'm not making this up, this is the world's first team-building exercise which unified the people of ancient Britain. It seems that as many as 4,000 people may have gathered on the site when the entire population numbered only tens of thousands. Now, remember, the first part of my presentation says stay open-minded, so we'll carry on. But anyway, he went on to say dating tests on artifacts. This is the classic archaeological mistake. They find something near something, and they immediately, so the antler, oh, it's whatever. Anyway, dating tests on artifacts showed that Stonehenge was built about 4,500 years ago, during a brief window when all societies across Britain had begun to share a common culture. Now, according to Professor Mike Parker Pearson, I'm going to name him because it's in the article, and I'll say allegedly a clever and sane man, people came from as far, again, it's in the article, people came from as far as the Scottish Highlands at the same time every year to feast and build the monument together in a matter of years. So it seemed there was amazing communication going on at this time. And I'm just trying to picture the kind of Scottish guys having a good old feast, and then the next day, well, they don't have to worry about the language problem because just say, look, up there, and oh yeah. So there's obviously clearly coming down. There's at that time, even 4,400 years, 4,500 years ago, there's a lot of bears and wolves and all sorts of stuff around at that time, and I think. They came up with the idea because they found the tooth of an animal from, obviously migrated down, because animals migrate from the Highlands of Scotland, so found this tooth, and of course it became used in the feast. These guys from Scotland brought it down and so on. Anyway, they got their ideas for. But this is, I kind of call these guys Klingons, you know, the establishment, the English heritage, because they have a date and they just absolutely refuse to budge. But it's interesting that in the last few weeks we've seen situations in Turkey and in Bankery in Aberdeenshire where they're starting to date things out at 11,000 years, for goodness sake. So I think, ooh, this is interesting, what's going on? But anyway, I'll get into conspiracy theories on that. But the other break that I had was Professor Atkinson from his tunnel dig left another legacy, a collapsing Silbury Hill. So English Heritage had to embark on this restoration conservation project in 2007. So I got heavily involved, kind of a little bit in the perimeter. I got inside, talked to guys from Skanska and English Heritage people and so on, and visited the tunnel many times. And so I put together this leaflet, which basically explains the findings, which I hope will convince people that Silbury Hill is a bit more than a chalk mound. But this is my kind of interpretation. Now, a year later, Jim Leary, the chief archaeologist on the project, he came out with his book called The Story of Silbury Hill. And this is it here. Now, for the traditional ideas, this is an excellent book. It's an excellent book. It's all the history and all the details. If anyone want a book on Silbury Hill, I highly recommend it. The Story of Silbury Hill. Beautifully illustrated and has lots of facts and lots of information. And a lot of the information contradicts some of the things that I've said, and a lot of the information supports what I have here. There is one mistake, which Jim Leary pointed out to me, that is on my interpretation, and I'll mention, not mistake, a misinterpretation if you like. But in the main, what I say here is what doesn't contradict what is in this book as far as the information, except obviously the interpretations differ. So in spite of Jim's book, and in spite of went on actually longer because it was quite a big problem, the 2007 and 2008, English Heritage and Jim Leary are still adamant that Silbury Hill is a 4,400-year chalk mound. They're adamant. And the reason they're adamant is because they have science on their side. So they say, we've got science on our side, so we are the boys. Now, let's have a look at the science on the side. Now, if we look at, they try to, even more recently, they're trying to say, oh, this antler was found in the middle of Silbury Hill, but it wasn't. I mean, because all the records we have is showing that it's found, and this is an English heritage document showing that here it is, an arrow pointing, you can just about see it, pointing here. So it's found on the edge of Silbury Hill. So that's one part of the science. Now let me, because of time, I'll probably read through a little bit of this. Josh McDowell and Don Stewart, at the Yale University study, yielded 3 different ages for the same antler: 5,340 years, 9,310, and 10,320 for the same antler. Now, what caused the variations in the result can be explained. Limestone contamination of the sample. The 5,340 years is the carbon-14 date for the antler. The 10,320 years is the limestone contaminant, and the 9,310 years is the date for the antler and limestone combined. Now, I have a sneaky suspicion that the guys who dated this to 4,400 had got a lot of dates. They had quite a few dates, didn't they? This is the one, and there's the Stonehenge date, so we'll have that one, 4,400 years old. So I think that's the key thing here. This is the first indication of contamination that's ignored by the traditional archaeologists, English heritage archaeologists. So if I look at the next one, ants have the answer. Now, Jill Campbell is an English heritage paleo-environments, and she believes ants have the answer. Now, without going into the technical details associated with dating insects, such as molecular clock rates, accelerated mass spectrography, chitin, etc., similar problems apply to dating insects. And so, according to the English heritage, surprise, surprise, these ants, etc., were found in an oxygen-free environment inside the hill, oxygen-free environment. And there was no possible way that the samples could be contaminated. But if you look here, she's in here somewhere, and here is where the samples come from, and here's obviously all the air being pumped in, etc. And so these are coming out here, straight there, and there isn't a clean room in sight. There's no understanding of like forensic science, etc. It's just so even if there was which there isn't, oxygen-free environment inside Silbury Hill, the samples would be contaminated in that route. Now, the English Heritage are not the only guys. I mean, there's a recent article, I think it was here. They found a lost barge in an Egyptian, near one of the Egyptian pyramids. And of course, in true fashion, they drilled a hole in, put a camera in, and look at it and see what it is. And they pulled it out, and of course, they forgot to fill up the hole. So of course, water's gone in, and insects have gone in, and the whole thing is now not really, can't be looked at properly scientifically. I don't know if it was done deliberate, because there were some other pieces of a boat that was found earlier, and they've disappeared. No one knows where they've gone. So, ants have the answers, yeah. Now, contamination internal. This is a quote again from Jim's book on page 91. The conditions in the tunnel were far from ideal for archaeological recording. It was cramped, and despite the ventilation tubes, the air was foul and the lighting poor at best. So the inside, the air was absolutely, so it's, anyway. So it's not an oxygen-free environment. And also, did smoking take place inside the tunnel? And they claim it didn't. They were not allowed to, but they did find tobacco tins, etc. inside, which maybe the Cardiff students and the professional navvies were having a quiet puff inside there. But when you get into areas of forensic science, these things are important. They do distort, they do affect information. Just leave that up just for a second, because it's basically this idea of the clean room idea. Now, externally, you cannot ignore 4,400 years of rain damage, frost damage coming down through Silbury Hill. So it's chalk. It is built with chalk bricks and so on, but chalk is porous. Admittedly, some chalks are less porous than others, but nevertheless, it's porous. And when I walked through the tunnel on a few occasions, the walls were wet. They were soaking wet. And so you cannot ignore that water has been seeping through the hill for all these years. And so, of course, we're talking about external pollutants. So there may be air pollution through volcanic eruptions over those years, the Industrial Revolution, cars going across the A4, driving up and down the A4, and just animals grazing on the hill and human activity on the hill. For example, there was an Anglo-Saxon hill fort, well, more like a lookout post. And I think at this time, they split the cap off the top of Silbury Hill to build the platform. And so where did these guys go to the toilet, etc.? No, too much into that. So there's a lot, of pollution, if you like, seeping through the hill. But nevertheless, this is seen by English Heritage as an uncontaminated site. Just worth mentioning a site worth looking into. Probably all know about it in here, so maybe something you hear. The megalithic portal, which comes with regular updates from Andy Burnham, and he beseeches us not to climb on Silbury Hill, but the damage has already been done by the professional archaeologists. I've got to skip through, it's important, get some questions. Now, the core samples, again, you can see heavily polluted. There's all sorts of stuff going on here. There's trees, roots growing down, and it's known if you want a prime sample, you've got to go at least a mile underground to eliminate pollution, contamination, and so on from the result. Same thing with Stonehenge, 8 years earlier, drilled samples. You can see somewhere in here, they found a date of 4,400 years old. So with this 8 years apart, they managed to find the same date from the core samples. It's 4,400 years old, so they're the same. So Jim Leary, of course, is really pleased with this 4 samples from Marlborough, because he says that this is an astonishing discovery. The Marlborough Mound has been one of the biggest mysteries in the Wessex landscape. For centuries, people have wondered whether it's Silbury's little sister, and now we have an answer. This is a very exciting time for British prehistory. So, but I also have science on my side. Now, I have to confess at this point that I have no archaeological qualification whatsoever. My background is electronic engineering. I have a degree in electrical and electronic engineering. And this kind of propelled me into this exciting semiconductor computer industry, which spawned computers, mobile phones, satellites, DNA, etc., all these wonderful things. But one of the most interesting things that it has produced is the internet. And I'm a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. I think, well, because the world's run by a few people, why have they allowed us the internet? What's going on? And I think that they started off thinking it was a way of keeping an eye on us, keeping a check on us. But it's kind of backfired, because one of the things that differentiates us from other animals, creatures on the planet, is we can collaborate. So this is allowing us to collaborate in all sorts of ventures. So we're seeing our inventions and all sorts of things increasing at a huge rate, which has happened really in the last, since almost the invention of the silicon chip and the World Wide Web. Probably all of us in this room have got links to a network, including myself. I've got a network of scientists, Egyptologists, archaeologists, independent researchers, and they have wealth of knowledge. Some of them are very highly qualified, and some are independent who have no qualifications whatsoever, but they're still very clever, and they come up with some really good ideas. So sometimes you can be too intellectual when we start looking at things. So I have almost an army of people that I can talk to and communicate with regarding my information. So for example, this is a discrepancy. This, I've been told, is something that was dug, a pit that was dug, and it's not a chamber. So I have to bow to Jim Leary's assertion that it's not a chamber. But he didn't go on to say it's not a chamber, but there are chambers in Silbury Hill. So he kind of all went, no, there's no chamber, not a chamber. In actual fact, in his book, on page 22, this is L.F. Brooks of 22 Stratton Road, Pusey, was quoted in the Marlborough Times in August 1962 as describing how during the First World War she used to live very near the hill and was told by her parents that there were caverns inside. When the entrance caved in 1915, a tiny passage led first of all downwards and then altered course and proceeded upwards. Eventually it forked with one way leading to a dead end and another to a cavern about as big as a room. Beyond this, there was another cavern similar to the first. We took candles in with us and used to write our names on the ceilings with the candle smoke. The whole system must have gone about 3 parts through the hill, she said, and it was very frightening. My brother would blow out the candle and I would be terrified. So there are chambers in the point making. There are chambers. Now the other piece of information I have, which is quite interesting, was the flint flakes. They found flint flakes inside, and Barry Bishop from English Heritage dated these to 12,000 years. And they were found in pits in the very top of the very first phase. And so it's strange that the structures seem to have been very carefully put together. Why were these built? Are they some kind of transducer device? Are they some kind of date stamp? But anyway, they were found there. Mollusk snails were found. I found some. Our English Skanska guys come to some of the snails, and I sent them off to the University of Mexico, and they dated them to over 11,000 years old. I don't have time to read Jill's comment, but she basically says that's not. I should be able to read it, but I won't go through that at the moment. And here's some blocks, chalk blocks that were found. And sarsen stone, piece of sarsen stone found in the hill. Now this is the very interesting piece of evidence. It's a very thin, butter textured piece of running across. It runs all the way down across here, across the scroll. So this is the ground, and this is Silbury Hill above it. So this is a kind of sheet. And when I looked at it, the whole picture of Silbury Hill, right in the middle, there's a pile of gravel on top of the sheet. It was almost like it's a tablecloth with a salt and pepper pot in the middle, and so it can adjust, maneuver the mica sheet. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. I sent this off as butter texture material to, I think, the University of Phoenix, and they reckon it was, although it was now soft, it was in fact, probably thought it may have been illite, which is a form of mica. And this is a bit more solid, a bit, obviously much thicker than this. This is very thin because it's fallen apart over the years, but this is an idea of a mica sheet. Now, I think this could give us the biggest clue to Silbury Hill, because if there's some way of measuring while the hill was open, if we could have drilled through the different compass directions, we could have maybe established if it was a geometric shape, and maybe where the position was on the ground. So this is quite an interesting part of the information we found. So we have the various things that we discovered that start to build up a picture of quite a high pyramid. These bits of sarsen stone have fallen in here and so on. And there's different bits of information that could support that it was a pyramid. So I have to move a little bit quicker. Oh, just missed that bit, I think. Oh no, yeah, we probably saw this bit here is the mica sheet. We can't get to it, but I know I've got some friends, scientists, who are looking at ground-penetrating radar equipment, and it's now linked to satellites, and we're now starting to get deeper and deeper into penetrating remote areas. So I often have a discussion with them to be very careful when you pass this information on to archaeologists and Egyptologists, because, okay, don't dig there because there's nothing there, but we found through this ground-penetrating equipment that you need to be looking somewhere else. But we've got to be careful how much information we give them until these Egyptologists become more skilled in forensic science. So this idea is what it may look like, but this is the interesting bit here from Jim Leary in an article. He basically highlights the fact that there were these stones, large sarsen stones on top of the hill, and he links them to, always get linked with ceremonial mounds and all sorts of things, spirits of dead ancestors, but they were probably some cap on top of the hill. Fairly recent picture of Silbury Hill, an older picture. You can see what happened in the Roman times. It must have been quite impressive. Silbury Hill must have been still quite impressive because the Romans had a settlement there and they had a road which they put a kink in it to avoid Silbury Hill. So I hope I provided enough information to show, basically, we can't prove either way. Is it Silbury Hill a chalk mound? It's all contaminated, it's all speculation. Is it a 12,000-year-old pyramid? It's all speculation and contamination and so on. So Silbury Hill, only thing I hope I've shown is that it's more than something more than a chalk pyramid, a chalk mound. So to look elsewhere, I've looked at ancient pyramids around the world, and again, we've seen anyone who's been inside the Great Pyramid in the subterranean chamber, which goes down into a well, will realize that water was important before they built the pyramid on top. They had this well underneath, and it's really quite impressive. So the pyramid, to me, was more to do with birth and life rather than death and the afterlife. In fact, the hieroglyphics that we see, we remember our school days, all this information around the walls, was probably to do with learning. And interesting, some of the hieroglyphics may actually come from tales from the extraterrestrials' experiences on a distant planet. So the stories shown in the hieroglyphics may actually be alien. So you can see all these pyramids. I think Nigel will be talking about Bosnian pyramids, so on. And very quick, this is the Silbury Hill type pyramid next to the Bent pyramid. You can see it's in pyramid country, but look at it now. And oh, right, thank you. So if you can see how the pyramid are kind of beginning. Oh, this is kind of very dry area, so they're obviously not going to turn it. We're not seeing the being grassed over as we see here in Inverurie, or we see in Silbury Hill in Aberdeenshire. Silbury Hill's often been compared to the King Joseph's step pyramid in Saqqara, but if you look next to it, there is something that even looks better. If you can imagine grass covering this is like a Silbury Hill. So these are all kind of mounds. We can imagine in an area, in a climate like ours, they would be covered in grass. Now here's a chamber, which is in this side of the hill. So again, it's got all the ingredients of. So very quickly, the position of the pyramid. We probably all know this from your background, so I won't go into much detail. Pyramids are currently planned and constructed. Water nearby is common to all pyramids. Pyramids are able to collect negative ions from underground waters. So it's wireless technology. And we've had guys like Guy Underwood, and when he was alive, who used to be aware of these positive and negative effects on these energies. Pyramid shape can produce ionic current, produce our own frequencies. So it's like Your airports, you know which airport you're arriving at because of the information you're getting. All contain crystalline stones, passages, and the fact that there's always some artifact or inherited item which kind of confuses, open to lots of misunderstanding. So answer questions, you can see those, and Silbury Hill conclusions. Traditional theory was Silbury Hill a chalk mound, or my modern theory was Silbury built a white pyramid some 12,000 years ago. The arrival of extraterrestrials on our planet, the only logical explanation for the truly amazing evolution of the indigenous Homo sapiens over such a short period of time. Is the lack of anthropological evidence to the missing link due to the fact that the early man didn't change much physically. They were basically, aliens sexually mixed with them or changed or manipulated the gene. This is all, what I've talked about now is just a very small fraction of what actually I have in my book. So there's clearly a tsunami occurred 10,500 years, probably caused by a meteorite, which destroyed this civilization. And since then, we all have this huge amount of knowledge in our brains, and we're slowly recovering it through the generations, through different forms of genius, just different ideas people are slowly recovering. So this knowledge has always been there from the extraterrestrial alien times, but we're just slowly recovering it. And as a steady getting of this knowledge, will we now be at the beginning of our exploration of the universe? Well, it's something completely different waiting to be discovered. I'll leave it for you to decide. Thank you very much indeed for your attention and for listening so carefully. And as I say, the book, so I hate to do this because you often get this in these things, people start plugging books, but the book gives a lot more information, a lot more evidence about how extraterrestrials landed on this planet about 13,000 years ago, bred with or genetically manipulated the Homo sapien genes, and was so genetically close to the chimpanzee. So something seriously happened at this time for us here to sit here as a human race, so smart and so clever. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. John Cowie.
I'm really sorry. I think I've been very selfish and not left enough time. I really need feedback, but I'll talk to maybe afterwards.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Brilliant. And John's leaflet is out in the hall on the table about Silbury Hill as well. So back at 10 to 11.